Welcome again to Lakeshore Focus, a weekly show highlighting the key issues, important events, and interesting people in our region. I'm Keith Kirkpatrick. When discussing the 2015 legislative session, there is no hotter topic than education. With two distinct sides to the argument, everyone seems to have an opinion on what education should look like in the United States and particularly in Indiana. To discuss these varying opinions on our education system, we are joined by Paul Schlottman, the Superintendent of the Career Academy, South Bend, and Dr. Peggy Buffington, the Superintendent of the School City of Hobart. I'm glad to have both you guys here today.
Thank you for having us.
So since this is such a hot topic, I've decided to have a little prop here today. I happen to have this little bell that I'm going to have in case we get in debate, I have to ring the bell or something like that, to make, like, change sides or something. But, and I guess I need to probably get everybody to know who you are so they kind of know your perspective. Peggy, you've been the superintendent in Hobart how long now?
Since 2008.
Okay, and before that?
Assistant superintendent from 2000 to 2008 and director of technology 1994 to 2000, and I've taught since 1989.
Has all your time been in the Hobart system?
Yes, it has.
Okay, wow, isn't that kind of unusual a little bit?
I would say a little bit, sure.
Because a lot of the superintendents, assistant superintendents move around a bit. Sometimes.
Sometimes they do. I would say that that's correct.
Okay, but I know you've had a huge impact there and a very positive one.
Well, thank you for that. We're Brickies and we're proud of it.
And you got that color on today?
I do wear purple. I bleed purple and gold.
There we go. Now, Paul's probably the one who's moved around more. So, Paul, your background, you started in Detroit.
Yeah, I started in the Ferndale Public Schools just outside of Detroit, came to Indiana about 9 years ago, served as a principal in Porter Township, and then moved into the role as superintendent of the Career Academy a little over a year ago.
And that's in South Bend.
Correct.
Now, right? Okay.
Yep.
So, but and the reason I want to make sure our audience knows I've got you on here is because you've got that perspective of having been in an urban school in Detroit, you've been in a small school in Porter County, and now you're kind of in a town-sized place of South Bend, and in different kind of roles too. So this education issue is probably, would you both say this is the hottest thing in the legislature this season?
Most definitely.
Why is that, Peggy?
It's about funding, and I really believe that it comes down to just making sure that adequate dollars are being allocated across the board to serve the children in Indiana. And I think that it's one of the most relevant topics because we want to make sure that we're equipping our kids for 21st century living. And it should be a priority to look at the way things are being funded right now.
It seems like this whole debate is drawn to a climax. This has been going on for a while in the state of Indiana, it seems like. So why, Paul, this year is it all of a sudden so critical?
Well, education only comes up for funding periodically. So we've had some economic difficulties for quite a while. And with the funding formula that we have now, we need to take advantage of the fact that the economy is starting to come back, that revenues that are coming in from the sales tax and otherwise are there. And so this is really an opportunity for the state to do some catch up on funding that has been not there for many years.
It's been very stagnant over the course, let's just go back to 2009. 2009 is when public schools took a $300 million cut, and they've had to make adjustments all along the way. You've seen many schools go out on referendums, and basically it came down to when we switched to the general fund being funded by sales tax, and then we went into recession and we had the $300 million cut. We've made adjustments across the board with program cuts, et cetera, but in the meantime the funding has been stagnant. It's not been anywhere close to the cost of living, and it's a struggle for school corporations.
Do you think there's any discussion at all to reconsider this whole switch to sales tax? Because I know that was a huge issue for the state to switch the funding over, but now I think some people are going, wait a second, maybe this wasn't so smart. But I don't hear anybody talking about what's changing.
I don't hear anybody talking about that.
Indiana has the lowest sales tax in the United States, and that is because of that switch. I was working in Michigan at the same time that Michigan went from primarily a local property tax to a sales tax formula. The problem with that change that occurred and what I was trying to highlight at the time when I had come to Indiana was the fact that really when you're taxing property values, you're having a better correlation of taxing what people's actual wealth is. When you move to a sales tax formula, not only are you disproportionately taxing people of lower income, but you are also much more volatile to economic conditions.
But having said that,
right,
and we've talked about it, it doesn't sound like this state, because the people of the state voted to do this, right? So I mean,
overwhelmingly,
it was kind of
yes.
it was overwhelming to kind of get rid of the property tax or reduce the property taxes. So it doesn't sound like we're going back. But the bottom line is, this is going to affect us for a long time in terms of we're always tied to the economy, right?
Sure.
So now we're trying to, with the economy back up, trying to fix maybe some of the deficit. Is that how you would explain
Well,
it?
I think the most important thing to look at is that when you're looking at the funding formula and you have your foundation and then you have the complexity, which takes into account poverty, and how do you try to give everybody an equal tuition support for their general fund, which pays for salaries, et cetera. And so how do you make that equal? And it's a very difficult task to do. I think one of the things that you'll hear superintendents of community public schools tell you is that we're vying for every resource that we can to offer the best programming we can for our children. And so one of the very hot topics that comes to mind is charter schools and the voucher program, knowing that that comes right off the top of our tuition support.
That's where I was getting ready to go, so I'm glad you led right into that. I could count on you for that. So,
Transitions, I'm good for that.
You're good for the transition. Well, I think this is there's so many issues, so we kind of dealt with one of them. Now this issue about the charter schools, and let me see if I can frame this a little bit. It seems like we have one side, particularly the Republican side, is saying Indiana ought to lead reform in the nation, and we're going to do this through I call it privatizing, but we're going to have these charter schools, and they're going to really put the pressure on public schools to perform better. And if the public schools can't perform better, then the charter school will kind of replace that, or it gives parents choices and so forth. Am I framing that fairly well? Is there more to it than that?
Well, there is more to it. Obviously, those people who are wealthy have a lot of choices when it comes to education because they can choose either private or have the means to actually transport their kids some distance to another school. So it becomes an issue of those that have the resources have a lot of choices, and ultimately. What I think that the state is trying to do through the charter school program is to try to provide choices for those schools that or those districts where families don't have those financial options.
So, Paul, you're running one of these charter schools.
Yep.
So, I mean, so you see that as giving these parents a choice, but at the meantime, they're pulling their kids out of the public schools. Right?
Correct. And I have 26 years in traditional education, and so I understand the dilemmas. I understand the choices that we saw in Michigan when I was there. They passed the school choice law, allowing people to move from district to district, and that made a lot of problems for districts because it was hard to budget or to plan for the future because you weren't sure what your resources or the number of students or pupils that you would have from year to year. So I'm keenly aware of those challenges, but I also am aware that in those districts where choices are needed, I think that it becomes a challenge of how do you provide those.
Well, how do you define where a choice is needed?
Let's talk about resources, though, in terms of, because respectfully so, I know that he has a great program in his career academies, but I also think that local school corporations provide those in the form of career and technical ed. I have career academies in my high school. I know there's new tech going on. There's small learning communities going on everywhere. Basically, I look at that as a diversion of money that could be spent on community public schools and strengthen the programs that they have. In the current budget proposal that is on the table right now, it's promised 2% increase the first year, 1% the second year. And really when it comes down to looking at what the forecast cost of charter schools and the voucher program, it ends up being a 1.3% increase in the first year, and I believe it's down to 0.3% the second year. And so when you look at those precious dollars, I'm going to look at you and say, community schools need every bit of those resources, and I can provide a career academy. He's replicating services that I have in my high school. So why should we be diverting dollars into something that's already being afforded?
Well, I think
now, and I know he has that point where he's saying, what if it doesn't exist there? But I think that that's where in communities that we need to strengthen, we need to invest those dollars in those community schools so that they do have those programs. He easily could be a part of the public school system from which his career academy exists. When you're looking at the reality of achievement for kids, and this has been on the legislative table before, looking at early education, and there is this whole business of we're going to do the pilot. There's so many things that we can look at that funding dollar and say, what should we be doing with that money?
Well, then why aren't you part of the public school system?
The charter law and our organizational structure gives us a certain fluidity and the ability to adapt and reform and change. There are certain things that we can accomplish as a smaller organization that would be much more difficult to accomplish in a larger system.
Why is it difficult for the public schools to do it? And it sounds like that's an advantage that you get over the public schools.
Well, it's an advantage
Almost an unfair
because
advantage.
Well, no, it's an advantage because we take advantage of it. We're really not doing any things that the public school can't do. But between our business partnerships, our involvement with the community, our school in particular is a career academy focus because we recognize the fact that most of our students aren't going to be able to pay for their college, or their parents won't be able to. So in our case, we want to provide them with a high value career and a high value vocation that they can make their own means enough.
But why didn't the
to
public
pay for that.
schools
Okay,
offer
so
that?
let's talk about that just a little bit, because again, this could be a part of a public school system. All of us have career and technical education programs, and I see when we want to increase career and technical education, he is a wonderful example of being able to do career academies and career and technical education. I happen to belong to the Porter County Career Technical Education Center, who offers just a variety of career and technical ed programs with dual credit. And there are business partners. That's one model. The career academies inside of my high school affords me all other types of business opportunities for that. I would like to see the public, the taxpayers' dollars being invested in my school corporation as well as the other community public schools so that we can grow those programs. I applaud his efforts. I believe it needs to be inside of the community public schools because he has a wonderful program.
Has the charter schools affected your school system directly? Because I know there's a difference, because it had a huge impact in Gary and in some of the other communities, but do you feel like there's a competition for charter schools in your community? Have you lost students?
I don't see that there's competition per se in the School City of Hobart. I do think that it's had an impact on all of us in terms of funding. And in particular, what's really sad to me is that their performance is lacking. Now, I can look on your side of the table where he's offering these career pathways, and when you're in high school and you're getting ready to go to that next stage in life, all high schools are providing that. There's choices for career and technical education. He easily could fit within the equation of a community public school. So when we go back to the whole issue of, well, what if they don't have that opportunity? Then our job is to invest in that community public school to let them have those opportunities.
But I want to look beyond just the career education piece too. I mean, do you feel, how do you look at all the charter schools? Because some are performing poorly and
Correct.
some are performing well.
Well, and I do want to point out that, and Peggy knows this as well, is there's a very strong relationship between family income and performance.
Correct.
And so when you have the vast majority of charter schools placed in areas that have a high level of poverty, yeah, you're going to have low performing schools because that's where it happens. There is a very strong relationship between that income.
But wasn't that the basic idea of setting these up? Was
Correct.
Gary is a good example,
Right.
and Hammond and so forth. To put a charter school in there would put pressure on the public schools to perform better, or at least give parents a chance to send their kids to different school.
And when we look at, if we want to use Gary as an example, here is a school corporation that is doing everything in their power to be high achievers. And when we look at the fact that early education is a critical factor there, and let's not forget that the social, emotional, family support that is critically needed in high poverty areas, that's something that we should be looking at. So early education, early intervention, family support, and then when you're using that tax dollar to invest in that type of program in these communities, they can thrive. And let's also talk it with being at risk. I mean, when you're looking at early education, that intervention has to be ongoing early. So beyond preschool, full day kindergarten, looking at the literacy that we're providing for them in those early years. And then going into the programs that you so talk about. You have to have that foundation and background and that desire and passion and know it's available for you in your high school.
Let me ask this, because, and again, I know that you're not exactly on the opposite sides of the debate here, but
Not at all.
but I mean, what do we need to really do? I mean, what would the model look like? Because it seems like the leadership on the Republican side is trying to move toward as many of these charter schools as possible. There's more. I mean, that's what it looks like. And I hear some people say that's going to kill public education.
Well, I think Peggy and I both agree that on a funding issue, I think there is certainly the need for the complexity index. The need is that in those disadvantaged and at-risk areas, there is greater complexity. There are more social needs and needs for students that have to be met, and so there's more cost involved in that. So I think that is something that is working well. I do think, again, to go back to the point is that we have had a drought of funding increases for quite some time. The economy is coming back. This is the time to bring that funding up. And again, to the comment of the 2% and 1%, and that if that's not enough to meet the need, then we need to have more. We need to provide more resources.
Right. Can I just say something, Keith, too? The thing that is that we really need equitable funding for what our charge is. Our charge is to be able to make sure and ensure that all of our children are college and career ready. I mean, that may sound like a buzzword to a lot of people, but it's truly not. Our job is to make productive citizens. And when we're looking at college and career readiness, you have to go backwards. We have to look at where are they right now in terms of early education and providing that foundation to make them be able to be ready for college and career preparedness. And just going on to what you were saying, we have beautiful partnerships in Northwest Indiana. The Ready Northwest Indiana is a perfect example of working with employers and working with higher ed to provide dual credit, work-based learning internships, and just to take a really good look at what are the qualities of an employee that you're looking for.
Well, let me ask this, because, I mean, I continue to hear that it sounds like at least both parties or both sides of this issue seem to be at least saying more funding should be coming toward education. I kind of hear that. Then what I hear, though, is how it's going to be done is where it starts to get convoluted and a debate. If the money is to be, if there was more money, where should it go right now? If you were king of Indiana, where would you put the money?
Could we also throw, before he answers that question, that in that current budget proposal, there's $1,500 extra being proposed for tuition for charter schools. they're already, some of them, in a position where they're getting more tuition dollars than
Right.
your regular school system.
So how would you
So
make
there, there is some inequity in that.
And that is the extreme exception. Many more charter schools get less funding. And really, if the proposal is to not give the charter schools the $1,500, then give us transportation dollars. Give us the dollars for debt service. Give us the dollars for capital
Do you think we
projects.
should
So my
continue to
question
expand the
would be
charters?
this.
Because that's closer to $3,000.
Are you replicating services that are inside of school corporations already?
We are, in my building, we are not replicating services. We are providing a unique opportunity for students that is not found anywhere.
Porter County Career Technical Ed, in looking at some of the career pathway classes that you offer, could a Career Technical Ed Center offer those classes? Because in essence, when I look at your Career Academy, I'm looking at career and technical ed, which the governor proposed that he wanted to increase funding and he wanted more of that. So in essence, I look at you and I say, you're career and technical ed. Every school district should have high quality career technical ed, and I applaud you for that.
And career technical education funding hasn't increased in 10 years. It's $450 per student involved in those programs. And when you're offering industry standard programming like the Microsoft certification, the Cisco certification, the CompTIA certification, welding, advanced manufacturing, those programs cost way more than $450.
Let me ask this, because we are down a couple minutes. And I mean, for the average citizen listening to this, it's so complex. I mean, what would you say to the average citizen on what's your solution? I mean, what if you could do one thing, what would it be? What would that one thing be to kind of make it better?
Well, I think that our tax dollars have to be spent on public schools and community public schools and invest in them and the outcomes that you want to see. And so
In a fair way?
in a fair way.
How would you define fair?
Well, obviously, I want to take into consideration poverty at risk, and I also want to look at what is the goal that we want for every child, and educating every child is different in our neighborhoods, and so we have to take that into consideration. But we should never lower our expectations for what our end goals truly are. And so if you're going to ask me what our goals should be for providing the absolute best for every child, I want to see preschool, mandated full-day kindergarten. I want to see enough counselors to be able to help families that truly need additional help. And when I say counselors, the social emotional side, the family side of it, but then I want to switch gears with those counselors and make sure we have sufficient counselors for college career planning.
Okay, I want to give Paul a chance.
And don't
here.
forget my interventions and programs, which would be career and technical
You're gonna make me
ed,
ring the bell.
career and technical ed, and our career pathway programs.
I really think that we need to provide every parent and family in Indiana the option, the choice, the ability to take advantage of unique programming, of things that can happen that right now are only for the affluent, that are really for the wealthy and the wealthiest options.
But that's not true.
But we want to provide those choices and those options in the more disadvantaged communities and really give the kids a choice, because really what we're measuring for achievement and otherwise is performance on tests. And ultimately, what happens in life is having a job, having a career, having a vocation. Those things are much more
important.
important.
So the vocational programs you're talking about are existing in public schools. We should strengthen those with the dollars that are so precious that are being siphoned
We're out of
off
time.
to charter schools.
We're out of time. So this debate could go on. I appreciate you both being here. I hope it stimulates our audience to pay more attention to this issue and be looking for you in the papers and every place else you're talking, okay? Thanks for being here.
Thank you
Appreciate
for
it.
having us.
Thank you. All righty.
Great admiration for what you do. But I still believe your career in technical ed.
I hope this show made you think about the education issue facing the state of Indiana in this legislative session. Never before has there been a time for the public to step up and share their thoughts about the future of our children and their educational opportunities. Take time to read, listen, and study this complex issue. It is so important. We have 2, maybe 3 sides who all think they are absolutely right with the direction they are supporting. In a democratic process, we must all educate ourselves and try to reach a conclusion that takes into consideration all aspects of the debate. In the end, it must be a decision that is good for our children now and into the future. Thanks for watching our show. Have we enlightened you on the issue in this educational debate? Your reactions and thoughts would be interesting to hear. You can send them to our email address, which is listed on your screen. If you have not taken a look at our website, you should. There is so much to see. Go to www.lakeshorepublicmedia.org. From the website, you can watch past Lakeshore Focus episodes. Click on the TV tab, scroll down alphabetically until you see Lakeshore Focus. Another click and you can see a list of previously aired shows. Join us next week for another Lakeshore Focus. Until then, I'm Keith Kirkpatrick saying, make a positive difference in our world today.